we'll do um we'll do in Likutei Sichos in Chelik Ches. This is the first Sicha for the Parshas Bamidbar. So Rebbe will explain the connection between the portion of Bamidbar and Matan Torah, because Bamidbar is always read Matan Torah. And the Rebbe will explain the whole idea of counting. And even though Rashi says he counts them all the time, but realistically, they were only counted 3, 4 times at the end. Later on, why does Rashi say all the time? The Rebbe explains that the counting is something which gives the koyach, and at every stage of the journey of the Yidden. The Rebbe explains there were 3 stages. Each one of those stages, they were counted and they were given that extra strength, that of importance as they transitioned to a higher level. The Rebbe will also explain that a person is ready to give up their life in Mesiras Nefesh, as the Alter Rebbe says in Tanya. And why does the person do that Mesiras Nefesh? He can always do Teshuvah later on. And the Rebbe explains that this is one of the ways that a Yid doesn't even want to separate himself, even for a temporary, even if he can make it up later. A lot of different, very ideas over here that the Rebbe shares with us. We'll do the inside, and we'll go step by step. Bamidbar, Aleph. The Parsha Bamidbar linkt men bereiv Hashonim dem Shabbos for Vosfar Chag HaShavuos. In most years, we read the portion of Bamidbar before Shavuos. The Shabbos that comes before Shavuos, we read the portion of Bamidbar. There is man for Matan Torah. Shavuos, the time that we got the Torah. So we read Bamidbar before we celebrate Shavuos, the time that we were given the Torah. Und wie bald das jede Parsha hat a Scheiche zu dem bestimmten Zman, in welchen man lehnt sie. Since every portion of the Torah has a connection, there is a connection, a Sheiches, to the specific time in which you read it. So there is a connection between the time. The Torah portion goes week after week, but it comes out in different times. So there is a connection between the Torah portion, in this case, the Parshas Bamidbar, with Matan Torah, Shavuos, because Shavuos comes in most years within the Parsha of Bamidbar. And the Rebbe points out, this is by every festival, every time, special time, is connected to the Parsha, but especially when we talk about Shavuos, which is the time that the marriage between HaKadosh Baruch Hu and Knesset Yisrael, and the marriage, the chassan gets an aliyah. So the aliyah would be in the portion of Bamidbar. So it's not just at Shavuos, it's a time when the chassan himself gets the aliyah and that Shabbos. So there's a connection. Befrat, the Rebbe says, especially, as Matan Torah is Yom Chasunosa, is the time of the marriage. It's the time that Hashem marries, marriage between Hashem and the Jews. Und bei Nisuyin is der Chosen Eila LeTorah Shabbos Shekoit Machasana. By a marriage, the Chosen goes up to the Torah, gets an aliyah on the Shabbos that precedes the wedding. But Torah Chana to the Chasna as their preparation to the wedding. So the Bamidbar is the preparation, so to speak, of the wedding, and in which we're getting the aliyah. So what's the connection between the Parshas Bamidbar with the holiday of Shavuos in Matan Torah? Is der fun verstanden? So from this is understood as dem ebersten Zivui zu zählen Yidden, that Hashem's command to count the Jews, Su es Rosh Kol Adas B'nai Yisrael, count all the community of B'nai Yisrael, mit welchen die Sedra Tzachon. That's the beginning of the Sedra, count the B'nai Yisrael. Hota Shayches, it has a connection. On in on Hachone, and it is a preparation, like the Chassan prepares for the Chazanah. So the Nisuyim from Matan Torah to the marriage of Matan Torah. So basically, the Rebbe says the portion that we read by Midbar should be connected to the time of year when we read it, to the level of Shavuos and Matan Torah, especially that Matan Torah is a marriage, and on the Shabbos before, the Chassan gets an Aliyah. So there's a connection between, as a preparation to the wedding from this Shabbos, so there's a connection from Bamidbar to Shavuos, as the Rebbe will continue to explain. Now, the Rebbe is going to ask several questions about this whole counting. Most of the time, you count something because you want to know something is important. You want to make sure that it's always there. You're always counting it. But Hashem knows. So what and he also tells that Moshe and Aaron should count them. Why does Moshe and Aaron have to count if Hashem knows? And then the Rebbe asks further that why did the count take place a whole month later after the Mishkan was raised? And also why we have Moshe and Aaron. Let's look inside. These are all the questions the Rebbe asks in his base. Wird man es verstehen durch Magdim sein, will understand this by introducing. Mevayer sein das, was Rashi sagt, and to explain this that Rashi says, B'tchilas HaParsha, in the beginning of the Parsha. So Rashi says, Metoichi bosum lefonov meina oisum kol shor. Because they're dear before Hashem. The Jewish people are dear. So therefore Hashem is always counting them. Starting again, the Parshas Bamidbar were counting the Bnei Yisrael. Why again? So Rashi says Hashem is always counting them because they're there. And he says, Be'echad bin Nisan, Hukam HaMishkan. On the first day of Nisan, the Mishkan was stood up, raised after the Shiva Shivei HaMiluyim, and finally on Rosh Chodesh Nisan, the Mishkan was erected and stood up. U'bechad b'ir mono. So he counted them on the first day of year. So the Rebbe says, in this Rashi, there are several things that we need to understand. 3 questions. Vorim im Plug is nicht move on. Similarly, this is not understood. Aleph. So, das was dvorim chavivim werden oft gezählt. The fact that things that you hold dear are very often counted is as doch der Fahr. The reason is was mis äußern zu wissen sehr zoll, is because the intent is we want to know how much there are, because these are special things, they're dear. So we want to know how much we have. Mitzad zeir chavivus untayerkeit, because of their special affection, care, dearness, and their preciousness, the value is negeya yeder prat von sei. It's important, every detail. You want to know exactly because it's very important. Und Rebbe will man kol shah. So therefore, at all time, you want to say there continuously. This is you want to know the exact number because this is something which is special. So you want to know how much of it there are because these are each one. Everything is special. That's the reason why somebody would count all the time, because something that he holds dear. Aber der Eibishter weiß doch dem Mispar. Hashem knows the number von Eden. Euch on them zählen, Hashem doesn't have to count them to know the number. So the was hat geheißen as Moshe ve'Aaron sollen zählen Eden. How come he commanded that Moshe and Aaron should count the Yidden. Why did Hashem command them to count the Yidden when Hashem knows their numbers? And we're only counting in order to make sure that the specialty of each one of them. So when Hashem knows that, why did he have to count them? Number two, base. Since why are we counting here? Rashi just said because they built the Mishkan. And they built the Mishkan B'echad B'Nisan. And Rashi says they count them on Echad B'Yir. Why did they wait a month? Why didn't they count them right away? Rashi says, why did he count them now? Because when he's coming to rest his Shechina, which took place on Rosh Chodesh Nisan, he counts them. So this count should have taken place on the first day of Nisan. In the Tog was in Imis Hukam Mishkan on the same day in which the Mishkan was raised. Or the Akoponim Baldif Morgan, or maybe the next day. Maybe there was not time enough during that day itself to count them, so they waited till the next day. Why wait a whole month? If it wasn't possible to make it on the day of Rosh Chodesh Nisan, okay, so did it the next day. Why did they delay the counting for an entire month? Till the first day of year. Echad B'Nisan, the Mishkan was raised, and they waited with the counting of one first day of year. If the whole reason for this counting is associated when the Eibishter is resting the Shechina, which took place on Echad B'Nisan, so count them as close to Echad B'Nisan. Why wait a whole month? If you can't do it on the first day of Nisan, was a too busy day or whatever, do it the next day. Why wait till a whole month? Gimel. And the Rebbe will explain that Iyar is associated, the different level of Nisan and Iyar. We'll see Pepinimis and Yonim, and also Moshe and Aaron. So the Rebbe, this is the Rebbe is going to address in the third question. It's a unique in our counting that they also included Aaron together with Moshe. We don't find that by the other countings. And why was that different? Why was it counting over here after the Akomas HaMishkan, it was done also with Aaron? So the second question the Rebbe asked, why Iyar? Why wait? And now the Rebbe is going to ask, why Aaron? Gimel. Pavosot by them minyan gedarf zayin tifkidu oisum goimer atov Aaron. Why at this count you need to count you and Aaron? Anders wie bei alle friedliche minyanim. This is different than all previous counts. Beim Zählen die Iden ksheyotzu mimitzrayim, when they counted the Yidden as they left Egypt, over there we don't find atov Aaron. Unazoi zoich. The same thing would be true also in earlier countings. The Rebbe brings down the different psukim, but there was never the idea of Aaron. But over there, it's not even said who counted them. Not Moshe, not doesn't say. By the minyan Shnofel Begel, then the second time when they counted them, when the Yidden died by the Egel, stayed by Dabar Hashem Moshe. Over there, the Pasuk Hashem said to Moshe, Ki sisa es Rosh Bnei Yisrael, when you count the heads of Bnei Yisrael, that means that Moshe did the counting. So, but here, by minyan shalachra kamas hamishkan, by the counting, that's after the raising of the mishkan. Werd beferish angesagt, there is very clearly instructed as euch Aaron gedaft zählen, that also Aaron needed to count. Zusammen mit Moshe Rabbeinu, together with Moshe Rabbeinu. So what's the reason over here that Aaron needed to count together with Moshe? In the previous counts, we don't find anybody who counted them. The first one, Yotzum Mitzrayim. Here by Kisiso, it's Moshe, and here we say him and Aaron and Moshe. Also, why did they wait for a whole month to Echad Be'ir to do the counting? And also, why was it necessary Bichlal for Hashem to count when Hashem knows the numbers? Counting is usually because it's special to you, but that's only to make sure that each one of them is there. But here, the Eibishter knows that they're all there. So what was the purpose in counting? So these are the three questions the Rebbe asked in the Rashi. And the Rebbe will explain now Apipnimiyus HaInyonim. So the Rebbe is going to explain now this whole idea in the Pnimiyus Inyonim, in the inner meaning of things, explaining what the minyan is, explaining what Moshe and Aaron is, explaining what the month of Nisan and Iyar, and then all of these questions will become resolved, and that's what the Rebbe begins with in Oisgim. Is der biur b'chol zeh b'pnimiyus Inyonim. So the explanation in all of these above issues in the inner manner of things. So first, the Rebbe explains what is number. A number does not represent what is being counted, and everything that is counted is one. Whether important, less important, everybody is one. The Zach von Minyan, Tzelum, the idea of counting, when you count something, hat in sich die Eigenschaft, it has the characteristic, as alle werden gezählt als gleich, that everyone is counted as equals. Der Godel Shabigdolim, the great among the great, meaning in Maila v'chashivas, in advantage, important, the greatest in importance, wird nicht verrechnet, is not counted more than once, even though he's a very great person, and yet he's one. Und der Pokus shebepchusim, and the low amongst the low, wird nicht gerechnet als weniger von eins, is not counted less than one. Everybody is equal in the number. The greatest and the lowest. Davon is verstandig. So therefore, from this we understand, as chibosom, when we say you're counting them because they're dear, what kind of a deer we're talking about? If there is an advantage, that's different, but counting them because they're dear, meaning counting them for who they are, just die Chiba zu Eden, was wird ausgedrückt durch und in Minyan, that dear, that affection that is expressed through and in counting is nicht mitzad zeir protus di kemailas, that is not because they're individual advantages or greatness. Was in ze is do an Unterschied. So if we were talking about their advantages, there is a difference between ein yid and atzveit. There's a difference between one yid and another yid. So not everybody would not be one, because everybody is a different level. Nor mitzad nekudas hayahadus. This has to do with their point of Yiddishkeit. Was in them gleichen sich ois alle Yidden. That's all Yidden are equal. We are all equal, just the fact that we are Yidden, the point of our Yiddishkeit all straight. So therefore, there's no difference. Everybody is the same. That is the number. Number expresses the love because of our essence, because of the point of our Yiddishkeit. Unhayois as the nekudas hayadus misad atzma. So since that point of Yiddishkeit on its own, which means if you don't bring it out, if you don't count it as its own, is hecher von gilui, is higher than being revealed. So while each one has that. Every Yid, that's the point of Yiddishkeit, but it's higher than being revealed. The Farhod der Eberster Geis and Zählen die Yidden. That's why Hashem commanded to count the Yidden. Hagam as euch on the minyan is as klappe shmaya gal. Even without the number, the counting, Hashem knows. Before the heaven it's revealed, He knows how many they are, because the Valdurchum minyan turch sich auf der Gilui von der Nekudas Hayadus. Because when you count them through the counting, that accomplishes the revelation of that point of Yiddishkeit, which everybody has, but it's not revealed. The counting reveals that. Uvirashi taich dos ois, as Rashi translated in a frierdike sedra, in a previous sedra, wo is zum ersten Mal mefadish, in which he explained for the very first time, ados is as the Zählung von Eden is gekommen zu Libserchil. When the Rashi mentions that the counting of the Eden comes because Hashem's love, dearness, Hashem's affection to them. So what does Rashi say there? Lohidia. Lohidia means to let know chibosom, to let know their love, their dearness. To losen wissen. So rather to let know and plecken reveal their chiba, their dearness, their milah, their advantage, that they're loved. But that counting. So the Rebbe asked previously, why do we need to count them? The Eibishter knows anyways. It's not that because they're important, they're counted, but in this case, is the counting is that brings out their importance, because when you count them, you bring down that essence of the Yiddishkeit, which ordinarily, without counting, is beyond revelation. And this counting accomplishes to bring out that revelation, that level from hidden to revelation, that's higher than revelation into revelation. So now the Rebbe is going to continue to explain Rashi's language. That Rashi says he counts them kol shah. The Rebbe will question, what does it mean, kol shah? It doesn't count them all the time. We don't see that. The Rebbe will explain the impact is kol shah. He counts them so that the influence is felt all the time. Let's look inside. So based on this, we can also explain Rashi's language. It says, Moina oisom kol shah. He counts them every hour. So this is something needs to explanation. Why? Because it's not understood. Seemingly, this is totally not understood. Let it be true. They were counted, but not kol shah. Till this time, when he's counting them again, which is on the first of the second month, the Rosh Chodesh year, on the second year after going out of Mitzrayim, this was at least something more than a year, just a little bit over a year. Yetzias Mitzrayim was on Tezvav Nisan. And this was Aleph Iyar, another 15 days, Tezvav Nisan the next year, plus till Aleph Iyar. So it was a little more than a year. Seinen die Eden gezählt geworden 3 Mal. So 3 times they were counted. But other from Demelt on, but from then on, from that second year, is doch adurch agor größer meshach zman. The past a very long period of time for 38 years. Bis man noch einmal gezählt die Yidden, until they counted again the Yidden. Ishnas Arboim. So Und gar selten and very seldom is es given in the weiter dicke viele Jahren und behind the later years until today. We're saying the Eibishter counts us all the time, and up till that time, the Yidden were only counted 3 times, and then 38 years, on the 40th year before they entered Eretz Yisrael, counted again, and then after that, very seldom counted. In welchem hat Yidden gezählt bloß enigemol, only very few times the Yidden were counted. Wer steht im Medrash, it's brought down in the Medrash, as in Meshach von alles Manim, that during the duration of old time, bis until today, seien Eden gezählt geworden bloß 9 Mal. The Jews were only counted 9 times. Und as der 10. Minyan wird sein bewies am Mashiach, the 10th counting will be Mashiach. So in all of this time of exile, only 9 times. Heit, wie passt der Loshon moine oisum kol shah? So how does the language, what Rashi says, he counts them all the time, every hour, kol shah? But the Rebbe is going to explain this based upon what the idea of Minyan and the revelation. But before that, the Rebbe says, well, maybe when it says every hour, it doesn't mean literally, or it doesn't mean often, but maybe it means on every exceptional time. In Pashtus, Kemen Zognon, simply one can say, as mitloshen kol shah, when it says every hour, meint Rashi nit yed derweile. Rashi doesn't mean kol shah all the time, often, nor jede Ausnahme dike Zeit, every exceptional time. Wenn es ist vorgekommen bei Iden a gewisser Shinui, when by the Yidden there was a certain change, lemal yusa, something to their advantage, was das bringt das Shinui lemal yusa in chibus bosom, which brings a change for the better, for the advantage in their dearness to Hashem. Kol shah doesn't mean often, it means that every time that there is an exceptional case, something which expresses their dearness. So von deswegen is es nicht glattig in Loshen kol shah, but still it's not smooth saying kol shah. Kol shah means all the time, not only exception, but the Rebbe explains, based on the above, we can say that the impact of revealing their Yiddishkeit affects Kol Shah. He counts them to make them important for all the time. But based on the above, as their minyan is bichdei to megalazai the nekudas hayadus, that the purpose of the counting is to reveal that point of Yiddishkeit. Yesh loymar, we can say, as mitten loshen kol shah meint Rashi zu meramezayin. So we can say, when Rashi is kol shah, Rashi is hinting over here that the impact of revealing the Nekudas Hayadus is always, as der Gilu for Nekudas Hayadus, that revelation of the point of Yiddishkeit was wert aufgetan durch Minyan, which is accomplished through the counting, und is the far merumes in im, and that's why it's hinted in it, the Minyan, the number reveals, as we said before, the Yiddishkeit, everybody is one. That special Nekudas Hayadus is hinted in number when we counting. Kumt in an Eifon, so that Minyan comes in an Eifon as a filzich, that you can sense it. Erpoilt, it impacts. Wirkt kol shah. He has influences at all times. Meaning that the minyan, the revelations are kol shah all the time, because its impact, its influence is kol shah. And the Rebbe is going to bring now a very telling example from what the Alter Rebbe writes in Tanya to show how every time we have that revelation of that, and even during a period when a person himself is on a low level and he's doing other things wrong, and still it reveals the essence of the Yiddishkeit. The Alter Rebbe discusses about the fact that a person who is even on a very low level in his observance of Yiddishkeit is ready to give up his life on Mesiras Nefesh. And even for that temporary time that he can later on maybe do tshuva, but he still doesn't want to separate. That's the impact of revealing that the Kudas Hayadus in Kol Shor in all conditions. Let's look inside. B'shas men zwingt an Eden to din Avodah Zarah Rachman Islam. When you force a Yid to worship idols, Avodah Zarah, God forbid, similarly, it's also by all Avedas, was the Yitzhahara Tzvingta Eden Sutan that forces a Yid to do. So we have Goyim trying to force another religion on a Yid, they want him to worship Avodah Zarah. And the same thing is when the Yitzhahara is trying to force you to do an Aveda. What would be the point in giving up your life? You can say, Rebbe wants to demonstrate that the love and that the revelation is in all situations, because here you're being forced to worship Avodah Zarah. You're going to lose your life if you don't listen. So, Volter Lechede gekent trachten or Yid by under by the Yitzhahara forcing him to do an Aveda. So, Volter Lechede gekent trachten by sich. So he could have thinking by himself, since nothing stands in the way of tshuva. So what's so terrible? Now he's faced with losing his life because he won't worship Avodah Zarah. He can do tshuva, nothing stands in the way of tshuva. And what happens when you do tshuva? Undur tshuva, ma'ava, when you do the higher level of tshuva with love, this sin is uprooted from the beginning. So he says, why is there such an outcry? Why is it so important? That for one moment he will tear himself away from the Eberstein. Let him worship Avodah Zarah. Let him do an Avera. So he'll tear himself away, but he'll do tshuva, and the tshuva will repair it from the beginning. Hat doch ständig die Möglichkeit zu tshuva tun. He is able to do tshuva. Und der Mitzum ist Saken sein. Through tshuva he can fix. Und noch mehr. And a higher level of tshuva in ganzen Eker sein dem over. He can entirely uproot the past. Why is he giving up his life when it seems that's only a temporary issue and he's going to be able to undo it later on? Yet the Tanya says the fact is Zetman Ober as is nitazoi. You see that it's not the case. As a Yid is betevai great of Mesiras Nefesh, that a Yid naturally is ready to give up his life. Abi nit abgedissen werden von Obersten, as long he doesn't even want to tear himself away from Hashem. Afil of ein rega, even for one instant. Later on he's going to fix it, but right now, for one point, he doesn't want to tear himself away from the Eberstein. That's why he's ready for Mesiras Nefesh. Nid geguckt auf den Cheshbon, despite the calculation, Ashpete can let us Mesaken sein, that he can fix it later on. So why is that? And the time of them is. So what's the reason? Why is a Yid always ready for that Mesiras Nefesh? So the reason of this is weil der Oir Hashem, was is melubesh in nefesh von Eden, because the light of Hashem, which is dressed up in the life, in the soul of a Yid. Izer lemailo min hazman. He's higher than time. Vishalit umoishel olav, and it dominates the rules over him. You have that godly light in yourself, that special spark, which is dressed up in the soul of a Yid, and that's not time. In other words, the Torah is only temporarily. That's higher than time. So over there, you can't have it your way at all. So in relationship to that spark, light of Hashem in you, over there it makes no difference whether it's a short while or a long time, or a duration of a long time, because it's not in time, it's above time. Zain obgirisun chaz v'sholem, to be torn away from Oberstnef ein rega, to be torn away from Hashem for one instant, is beim abgefragt. It's totally negated, not considered, totally out of question. Punkt lange Zeit, just on a long time. It's out of the question to even separate yourself temporarily, because that, from the perspective of that level of Yiddishkeit, time isn't a factor, because it's above time. So you can't separate yourself any time from the Eberster. Und das meint Rashi zu andeit mit dem Loschen Moina Oisem Kol Shah. This is what Rashi means, that he counts them all the time. Der Minyan, what Rashi is saying here is that der Minyan von Nekudas Hayadus wirkt bei Eden, the counting, when we take that Nekudas Hayadus, we bring it out, impacts, wirkt bei Eden, it works by Eden verhit kol shoah, and it protects all the time. Afilu a kleine Weile, even for a short while. Kol shoah means all the time, because even for a short while. Und afilu wenn der noch keiner mesaken sein euch dem over, and even the fact that later on he can correct and fix the past. Vibald ober as in dem kleinem Zman. Since, however, in that short time, Bizer vet mesaken sein, till he will fix, is a fort an nifret chas v'sholem. He's still separated, God forbid, from Hashem in that period of time, until he does teshuvah and he fixes it to begin with from the beginning. Varf teravek alle cheshbonis, he throws away all calculation, und is sich moiser nefesh, and he gives up his life, gives up his soul, while the nekudas hayadus gewaltig, because that point of Yiddishkeit dominates, is moine. Moine is counts. That's counting. It counts all the time. That's an important. That nekudas yad counts all the time. Kol shah all the time. So therefore, the Rebbe demonstrates that the importance of minyan, as we explained it, that reveals the essence of Yiddishkeit, has the importance that it affects all the time. So while the actual counting happened maybe 3 times till then, a 4th time, and 9 times till Mashiach comes, but it's not only the counting, it's the counting, the revelation of the essence of the Yid that came about. That impacts under all conditions and every time, not to be separated from Hashem at all, even from a short time, even though he can fix it later on, would not even consider a Yid to be that separation. Why? Because the Etzem HaNeshama is revealed, is counted all the time. I say. So the Rebbe now is going to explain how revelation of the point of Yiddishkeit, that number, the minyan, had 3 different manifestations. These were the 3 countings that took place, that the Yidden were counted. How each new stage brought that Nekudas Hayadus to a greater and a more impactful way. Hey, Apikol Hanal. So based upon the above, wird man auch verstehen dem Chiluk zwischen den drei Fallen von Minyan. We can also understand the difference between these three cases and when they were counted. Those are quoted, brought down in Rashi. Rashi brings down, once when they went out from Egypt, then they were counted after they died when they made the golden calf. That's Farha Komas HaMishkan. That was before the Mishkan was raised. And on the first day of Iyar, which we're talking about, Nocha Komas HaMishkan, after the Mishkan was raised. That's what I said. This took place after the standing of the Mishkan. The other two were before. This was after. What are these three periods of time that we're talking about? We'll see how each period made an impact, and there was another counting. In Gilu Nekudas Hayadus, so the Rebbe says, when this revelation of the point of Yiddishkeit, Unirvikung of Yidden, and its impact on Yidden, so generally speaking, there are three levels of impact. Aleph, number one, how much of that Nekudas Hayadus? Is it just that he also has the revelation of that point where he's still himself, it doesn't change? Is it has an impact, but it hasn't transformed? Or is it totally absorbed the person? There's no more person. It's only about that source. It's only about that Nekudas Hayadus. Let's look inside. Aleph. As euch noch dem, wie es wird bei ihm nisgale die Nekudas Hayadus. That even after the Nekudas Hayadus is revealed. So this is number one. So how does that revelation of Nekudas Hayadus influence the person? So even after it is impacting the person to such an extent, zu rufen bei ihm die Greatkeit auf Mesiras Nefesh bepoil mamish, that it brings out by the person he's ready to give up his life actually. So notwithstanding that it impacts him that way, but yet bleiben fort seine koiches pnim, but still it doesn't mean that he doesn't have his inner powers, the person who he is, Seichel v'chulu, his intellect, emotions, everything, he's still the same person. Yet, azeviz seinen given free, like they were before. So there's an impact, but you still are a person. The impact of the revelation of Nekudas Hayadus influences you to go Mesiras Nefesh, but you didn't lose your seichel and everything else while you're going to go Mesiras Nefesh, but you still have yourself. That's the first of the levels. The Rebbe brings an example of derech dugma vidos v'tarum geret in Tanya, similar to what it's discussed in the Tanya. So over there, we see a very clear example of what we mean to demonstrate what we're talking about. Over there it says, as oich hakal shebekalim is zichmoiser nefesh of kiddush Hashem. Even a light-headed amongst light-headed. It means a very not religious, very serious religious person is giving up his life for Kiddush Hashem. So you're seeing on one hand, he's doing the ultimate, he's giving up his life for Hashem. But at the same time, we're calling him a kal shebekalim, a light-headed among light-headed, not religious. What does that mean? That means that he didn't change, he's still a kal shebekalim. When it comes to other mitzvahs, he's still kal shebekalim. Here he's ready for Mesiras Nefesh. So you see that Mesiras Nefesh is working, but it didn't change the person. He's still not doing everything he's supposed to be doing on a regular basis. Similar to what's discussed in Tanya, as that also lightheaded among lightheaded and gives up his life against Hashem. Und doch wird gerufen kal shebekalim. And we still call him a lightheaded among lightheaded. Euch dann, wenn steht in Greatkeit and Mesiris Nefesh Mamash, even when he's standing ready to give up his life. Warum sie recht? Why are we calling him a kal shebekalim? Because it's possible. As if andere Averes soll Yever sein, other of sins he will violate. So he still may be a kal shebekalim, and yet the neshama works, that spark of Yiddishkeit will impact him that he will go on Kiddush Hashem. That means that it works, but it doesn't change the person's koiches pnimiyim, who he is. That's the first level. There's a higher level, number 2, base. The second level is that it changes the person around as well. That's the one step up. That's the number 2. Based as the nekudas hayadus wirkt euch auf seine koiches pnimiyim. That point of Yiddishkeit impacts also his inner powers. By ihm legt sich in seichel v'chulu, so that it makes sense in his intellect. Loit vidos is masi mitzad nekudas hayadus, how it's fitting from that perspective of your point of Yiddishkeit. You intellectually begin, your koiches pnimiyim begin to feel the same as the essence of nefesh feels. So this is already influencing your koiches pnimiyim, so that your inner koiches feel what the essence of the neshama feels. But still, it is not completely. Aber zusammen damit is fortnirgish, but together with that, while you understand and it fits that, but you still feel as ob der uplegin moech, that it makes sense to you is not something which from the intellect on its own. Kommt nicht von seichel gufa. It's not from the intellect itself. Nor stammt von an ander koech, but this comes from. This is comes about from a different power, was hod by Wirksein Verstand, which influence your understanding. It's not your understanding itself, even though you understand it now, but you see like something pushed it, that something from the outside convinced it, oh, now my seichel understands that. It's not seichel on its own, but it comes from the outside. That's the second level. So the second level, it impacts the level of Nekudas Hayadus, the intellect, but you can still feel that it's not the intellect really, but something which is telling it that it feels and it goes along. But the third level, the higher level, Gimel, the third level is that becomes who you are, everything. As the Nekudas, Hayadus Nemdur Zagantzemahus, that point of Yiddishkeit takes, absorbs, and takes over your whole essence. That becomes your whole entity. You're only the etzem and neshama. That's it, what it is. There's nothing else there. And therefore, automatically, as the seichel mitzad atzmi, so then the seichel on its own is mechayiv, concludes, versteht and understand behesem the nekuda, fitting with this nekuda. The highest level, this third level, is that you become all what this etzem nefesh, that permeates, that takes over everything, and you see it that way as well. That's the impact. And these 3 levels are the 3 levels, the counting of the Yidden. Und in dem besteht der Chiluk zwischen den 3 Minyonim Anal, and in this consists the difference between the 3 countings of above. By Yitzias Mitzrayim, the first one when they went out of Egypt. Over there, their inner koiches, they didn't change. They had to run away. It was an arousal from above. It came from Maila. By Yitzias Mitzrayim, by Eden Meir given the Amun Pshuta. By the exodus of Mitzrayim, by Yidden, the simple faith, that was what shined by them. Bis das hat Basea Rüßgerufen, till that has brought out by them lechtich, Acharai Bamidbar Beretz Lizrua, to follow Hashem in the Midbar, in a land that is not sown, in the desert. They didn't follow Hashem. They followed Hashem. That was with a Amunah, simple faith to go after Hashem. However, that did not impact their inner powers, the inner koiches. Das ist aber nicht gewesen verbunden mit seine koiches pnimim. That was not tied to their inner koiches. It was like an outside force, an amuna, but not a belief which is beyond, but not in their intellect, not in their emotions. That did not go along. They just followed the Eibishter because of an higher amuna that they had. So that's the number one. Then the second step comes Far Hakomas Hamishkon. Wenn durch Va'osuli Migdosh hat sich gedarft öfton der Vishachanti Besuchon. So now we're getting ready for the raising of the Mishkan, in which we're going to make a Migdosh. The Eibishter is going to dwell amongst us. Besuchon, it's not going to be just aloof, and not going to be Amunah. It's going to be the Eibishter is coming to rest amongst us, so that also our inside is Koiches Pnimim will be changed. In apnimis, we said besoicham means amongst them, but the way the Rebbe teaches besoicham in an inner is given at zweiter minyan. Over here now it was the second counting. Now we're counting again to accomplish that new level. Und es hat nicht maßbe gewesen die Chiba, was ist nisgali geworden durch ein Minyan betzeisam in Mitzrayim. It wasn't sufficient that it was revealed. That special love, affection, that was when they were counted when they went out of Mitzrayim. Because now that minyan, that love, that expression needs to go further than just the Amunah Pshuta. Now, what did that special affection, dearness, it told us, Gil in the Kudus Hayadus, that revelation of the point of Yiddishkeit, it had to be in a much more deeper way, as a durchnemen bawirken euch de koiches pnimim, that it should impact and it should also take through, be absorbed by also the inner koiches. Shachanti besoicham, live amongst them. So the Eibishter we need now that point of Yiddishkeit to get to the inner powers. They should be prepared that the revelation of Vishachanti, I will dwell, should be in them. So that needed another counting to bring out that it shouldn't remain just an Emunah Pshuta, but it should change them in a way of Vishachanti B'soicham. That was the purpose of the Mishkan. And then finally, the noch, and then after they raised the Mishkan, this is the counting we're talking about now, the Aleph Be'ir. When Eden haben schon getan, die Avede im Mishkan. When the Yidden already did the service in the Mishkan. Und sie allein seien damit geworden am Mishkan zum Ebersten, and then they became a Mishkan to Hashem through their actual work, not only preparing, but they were working, they had already the Mishkan. Nid blois mitzad v'shachanti, it's not just I will dwell amongst you, which Hashem says, I will be by you, nor mitzad zer egen avoda. Now it comes to their own avoda. They were working on that. At this point, Demult is geworden a dritter minyan. Then came about a third counting. That what? As riboson shel Yisrael, that this special dearness of the Yid, Nekudas Hayadus, is nisgale geworden, that it became revealed euch mitzad di koiches pnimim gufa, that it came from the perspective of the koiches pnimim. It's not shachanti, Hashem pushing them, but they themselves turned into a mishkan. That nekudas hayadus, that they themselves, it comes from them. Kinal, as the Rebbe said, the third and the highest level is not when something else is pushing you, giving it to you, but you turned around. That came about after the third, after the Mishkan was there already, and they served in the Mishkan. So the Rebbe here explained that there is three levels. How much the impact of the Nekudas Hayadus, whether it doesn't impact the person's koiches giluyim, as in the example of the person who's not religious and yet he gives over, ready to give his life away for Hashem, which means that that level of godliness has not really reached his koiches pnimim. The second level, and that took place by Yitzias Mitzrayim, in which the Yidden just followed Hashem with simple faith, but they did not really change themselves, they weren't changed. The second step, the higher level, is when it makes a difference also to your koiches pnimium, but it comes from outside. This was accomplished by the second count, when the Eibishter, before the Mishkan, which they were supposed to take it, and in them, not only from Amuna outside, that was a second counting which brought out that point, and that the V'shachanti is B'soichem, but it's still, in this guy, it comes from the Eibishter. And there, and the final one, and the third one, after they actually do the Avodah, so the Yidden transformed themselves, so all of themselves were in that level of that the Nekudas Hayadus took over their whole essence, so that they from their own self became a Mishkan for Hashem. We'll do now Oizvav. Now, because we were discussing the two perspectives, we're saying that it comes from Hashem, and then there's something that comes from the people. Those are the two levels. This will also give us an explanation why it was in the month of Iyar, because Iyar is considered the month which we work. That's why that counting was Iyar. Whereas Nisan is considered the month which Hashem gives us. Let's look inside. Damit wird euch werden verstandig. With this, it also be understood was the minyan shel achrei hakomas hamishkan, the count that took place after the Mishkan was raised. Is given ersh be'echad b'Iyar. They waited for the first day of Iyar. And also the other question the Rebbe asked, was euch Aaron zusammen mit Moshe? Why also Aaron together with Moshe? Haben sich dann gedarft beteiligt und im Zählen von Yidden. They needed to participate in the counting of the Yidden. Der Chiluk zwischen Nisan, dem Chodesh HaGeula Yetzias Mitzrayim, the difference between these 2 months, Nisan and Iyar. Nisan is the month of redemption, Exodus of Egypt. On Iyar, and the month of Iyar is unique. It has the mitzvah of Siras HaOmer the whole month. The Chodesh of Siras HaOmer, it's a month of Siras HaOmer. So what's the difference Nisan here? Nisan is Hamshocha Milmayla Lamata. Nisan is drawing down from above to below. On Iyar, Halom Milmata Lamayla. Iyar is elevating from below to above. Similarly, it is also the difference between Moshe and Aaron. As Moshe also Nisan Iyar and Moshe. Moshe is Shoshvina de Malka. Moshe is the Shoshvin, the support. By Chasna, you have a Shoshvin for the Chasna the Kala. So Moshe is the support sort of for Hashem, the Shoshvina de Malka. Was is Mamshech Elakus Lamata? He draws down godliness from above to below. And Aaron is Shoshvina de Matronisa. He is the queen's, the Shoshvin, the support for the queen, helps to bring the queen to the king. And his Maila Knesset Yisrael Milmata Lamaila. He brings up the Knesset Yisrael from below to above. So now we understand why Aaron had to be there together with Moshe and why we do it in the month of Iyar. Since the counting which is after raising the Mishkan is given that was in order to reveal that point of Yiddishkeit, not from a lid blois mitzad the nekuda gufa, not just from the perspective of that point of Yiddishkeit b'derech milmaylo lamata, from above to below, in such a way which we were infused with that from above. But the whole idea was, after the Mishkan was our work, nor but also because of our inner powers themselves, and away from below to above. The Rebbe had was gedacht durchgeführt werden durch Moshe und Aaron zusammen. That's why it needed to be accomplished for Moshe and Aaron. Moshe brings it down, Aaron brings it up, they together. Und davke be'echad l'chedesh hasheni. And specifically on the second month. When she's showing da, because at the second month there already exists nitlois dam shachem milamaylo. Not only what we draw down from above, like in the month of Nisan, but now to elevate the below, because that was the whole point of this counting, to bring down that the Nekudas Hayatus comes even from the perspective of the Mata, to bring it up higher. Oizai. Das ist euch die Sheiches zwischen Parshas Bamidbar. So the question, the Rebbe original question was, what's the connection of the Parshas Bamidbar with Shavuos? So now we're talking about that in this portion of Bamidbar, the counting that's taking place in Moshe Aaron was the month of Iyar, that it's to bring the Mata also elevating to the Maila, not only the Maila, but to bring them out. And this is essentially the Rebbe going to say what took place by Matan Torah, that connection between Milmaila Lamato, Milmata Lamaila. And das is euch die Sheiches. It's also the connection zwischen Parshas Bamidbar, the portion of Bamidbar, was ir oneib is der Tzivui Su'u Esrosh. It starts off with raise the head. And the Rebbe adds the word Su'u, was yesh loimar, Su'u is euch von Losh Nesuyin, marriage. Su'u, that's the hint of Matan Torah, which is the marriage. Mit B'yom Chasanos is a Matan Torah, with the Pasuk calls the Matan Torah, says Simchas Liba B'yom Chasanos is a Matan Torah, that's the marriage. So Nesuyim, that's the Bamidbar, which is marriage. By Matan Torah was accomplished these two ideas. The uppers came down to the lower. Hashem came down to this world to give us the Torah. And the lower ones, Moshe, we went up to the mountain, went up to the above. Und als Sachone zu dem Yichud von Eberste mit Yidden in Beide Kamen. And as a preparation to that union from Hashem with the Yidden in both lines, from the top to the bottom to the line. The Amshocha von Eidin Sof in Knesset Yisrael, drawing down the infinite light into the Knesset Yisrael, the gathering of Yidden. Und der Haloah from Knesset Yisrael to Eidin Sof, and the elevation of Knesset Yisrael to the Ein Sof. Latement in the Torah wegen Minyan, we read about the counting, was is given be'echad l'chodesh hasheni, on the second month. That was already the month of Iyar, which is the Sfiras HaEmer month, which is the Avodah Milmata L'mayla. Was kommt noch chodesh harishon u'zayin hamshachas. That follows the first month that come down. They're coming down. Now it's already going up. Was is given durch Moshe Rabbeinu, and this took place through Moshe Rabbeinu, which was Shoshvina de Malko. He was the Hamshacha, the support of the Melech. Un Aaron Shoshvina de Matronisa, and he was the support for the queen, and both of them, Moshe and Aaron, together accounting. That is a preparation. So the yichud from Matan Torah to that union of Matan Torah, as es wird durch Araisa v'Yisrael v'Kudsha B'richu Kulochat, that through the Torah that we got, the Yidden and Hashem become all one. This is Mesichas Shabbos Parshas Bamidbar Tovshin Chav Daled and Chav Hey.